So we operate in these this domain, but within our sectors, we don't do everything. In order to build deep expertise, we have created an ecosystem around these eight sector and around 100 subsectors. So for us, a caterer to a K-12 school is K-12 ecosystem rather than caterer itself. So that is the way we look at our universe of lending. And we started with what we call this concept of, I said, finding homogeneity. We created through a deep research an expert scorecard, our 100 plus expert scorecard, look at different operating parameter and give a tool to our underwriting officer what they have to look in a small business at the point of underwriting, and created a template of giving weightage to different operating parameter. This is an IP which we are creating over the next 5 years or so. We will have a templated platform wherein every small business can be underwritten differently. And we added and supplement that through a massive data analytics tool, which we created what we call our sector specific scorecard. We have filed patent for this, where we looked at roughly around 80 lakh loan records. We segregated those loan records in sectors, subsector, geography, and ticket size, and we tried filtering 20% of the bottom of the pyramid, which contribute 80% of the loss ratio. Actually, in 2 rounds of pandemic has proven that our data analytics driven underwriting actually works, and that is now reflected in our portfolio quality. In 2020, we evolved this because when the pandemic hit, we had a time of around 8-9 months to rethink and redesign and adopt to the newer changes which has happened, which we call the force effect of the digitization. And how we did it. So today, we moved from our entire underwriting to this what we call the data tripod. So as I said, that if you traditionally 5 years back, if you look at, or 4 years back, if you look at, a large lender would go to a small business and ask for balance sheet, ask for income tax return, do multiple other things. We believe that that is not required anymore. 100% of our all programs and underwriting, the first point of interface of underwriting is driven on this data tripod, which is GST, banking, and bureau. GST gives us 400 plus parameter, wherein you can, you can analyze the entire turnover, quality of turnover, and the, exposure which an entity is taking. When you take the GST and cross analyze it with banking, you can look at the quality of business which is being reflected in the formal sector. And banking also gives you real cash eligibility, ability to pay back not on 1 year old record, but at the point of the underwriting. And bureau gives the behavioral analysis. It's just not a cutoff of a score, but it gives you a behavioral analysis of how this customer would behave. So we have evolved this tripod of data and matured it, and actually our results are extremely well, coming out well, both in terms of portfolio quality and also our underwriting. And our statistical scorecard, we have evolved into what we call Grow Score 2, which has now the ability of also forecasting the future cash flow by combining the bureau and the banking data, and we are adding GST, and also being able to segregate customers into different categories, A, B, C, D, and E. We have now, in last 7-8 months of our data analytics shows that whatever is our statistical scorecard defines A, in terms of the portfolio performance, actually the portfolio performance, the bounce rate, the collection efficiency for those customers actually are very different or very superior to an E-classified customer. So I think that these are the changes which we have brought in and which are making sure that we are confident of the scale which we can get now. Second is that India is very large country. SMEs are in different pocket. We call it vast geography, varying need, and multiple sources of origination. So we have multiple types of small businesses. Most of them are still private. Some of them are now coming in public market. But there are people who serve the micro MSME segment, sub 25 lakh in a particular state. There are people who serve, machinery finance business, people who serve supply chain, people who do, buy now, pay later, merchant financing. We have tried to build, because we said that our aspiration is to take 1% market share of outstanding credit, serve 1 million customer, and that's why we decided to build a distribution franchise which has an ability to serve right from 1 lakh rupee borrowing customer to 3 crore borrowing customer. And we have done this in 4 ways. So I think so one of the advantage of pandemic for us, we had the time to continuously build our infrastructure. While we are a highly digital company, we can call us as a fintech as well. But our belief is that any digitization without the support of physical infrastructure in India doesn't work. And that's why we have taken a four-pronged strategy in terms of our distribution channel. Branch-led, wherein we have physical branches, ecosystem, wherein we look at a particular ecosystem and finance that. We have a platform wherein we are bringing multiple types of partners with whom we lend. And I think the last quarter this year, we will launch a full digital platform as well. In terms of our branch-led channel, we have two parts. One, what we call the prime branches. We are at around 14 odd location. We will take it to 25 location. We have micro branches. We are expanding rapidly. So today we have 41 plus branches. We will take it to roughly around 100 by this end year, and we'll take it to around 250 in next few years. So these are the two types of the branches. The reason why they are segregated is the kind of product we do. In our prime branches, we serve a prime customer. The definition of a prime customer, it is a customer between 50 lakh to or 20, 15 lakh to 3 odd crore by defining by three different products. They are prime because both on the rating curve, they are either in the bureau CMR 1 to 7 customer. Their type of collateral is prime and reported, and their payment behavior is all formal. And most of these businesses are done through intermediated custody, which means that there is a point of intermediation or a partner wherein our underwriting, risk collection, all of that is in-house, but the customer is being brought to us in the main prime location by somebody. Second is the micro segment, which is the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. We have taken the call that we will operate in 5 or 6 states, wherein our data shows that there is a resilience of portfolio which can be generated. And these are the customer, which is retail trade, small wholesale trade for up to 25 lakh rupees of borrowing. And there are different price curves. So not only we serve customer from 1 lakh to 3 crore, we also today serve customer with the borrowing needs between the price range of 9% to 18 odd percent. So that is the universe which we are all started operating in our branch-led channel. Second is our supply chain. So India has around $100 billion of credit gap just in supply chain itself. We think that that is what would take collateral to cash flow based financing. So we have invested very heavily in our entire supply chain framework. We are now going live on threads. We have built the entire GeM Sahay platform, and we look at supply chain in both. We do it through an anchor led, wherein we do vendor financing, distributor, dealer. We go right up to the last mile value chain. We can also do a non-anchor led. So if you are a supplier of a honey to Dabur, we don't need Dabur to confirm anything. Our data analytics platform can look at the periodicity of your invoice and the payment periodicity, and basis that can discount the invoice. So that's our second channel of ecosystem, which we call supply chain. Why we call it an ecosystem? Because we rely not just on the customer data, which is his turnover and cash flow, but we also look at an ecosystem through which he operates. And second is the second part of our, and as we said that we have anchor plus we have fintech partners to do that. We have built India's first prototype fully integrated OKIN network platform on GeM Sahay. We are integrated, probably the largest lender on GeM Sahay. Roughly around 700,000 plus sellers are there. We have done large number of transactions and it is growing there. Second part of our ecosystem is what we call the productive asset financing, which is machinery. In India, actually, if you look at, and we have companies like Electronica and Siemens who do machinery finance. The advantage of machinery-led secured financing is that when you lend against a property, sometimes the money can flow out of the business of SME. It is not used for productive generation of productive asset. Versus a machine has a productive revenue attached to that. So we have embedding ourselves with roughly around 150 plus of OEMs in their point of distribution and originate and finance a machinery. And this base of MSME customer is potentially available for us for cross sell, the term loan, the working capital, other. So that's our second channel. Third is we have built, and actually we have evolved this as the India's probably largest platform of supporting and reaching to the last mile. So as you know that there are large number of merchant ecosystem emerging out of Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato, many of them. There are two ways to reach and service those customers. We go and integrate with them directly, which we are also doing that. But the challenge there is that mostly these portfolios are generated at a 20-25% yield rate, but have a potential loss ratio of 3 to 5%. We've taken this call that to the reaching to that last mile, the massive fintech ecosystem and small NBFC ecosystem, our cost of capital can support going through them. So it's an API box platform wherein our score underwriting combines with their partner score underwriting, and we service the last mile customer. while we might have to take and spread, so if their customer is at a 25% yield, we are might be doing at 15% with our partner, but the partner would give us the first loss cover, which means that our portfolio would not have the same level of delinquency which is potentially there in that segment of the market. So that is the way we have evolved this. And on the same, this is a platform called Grow Extreme. On the same other side of the platform, we have large banking partners coming. So we have live with Bank of Baroda, we'll live with IDBI. Soon we should be live with another large bank. Eventually, these banks are co-lending on the portfolio generated by us, but banks would have an opportunity also through our platform to do co-lending to all of our underlying partners. So this can eventually become a very large marketplace. Co-lending is future. So this can become eventually very large marketplace for large liability providers to become a co-lender to not just to us, but many of our partners. And as we said, that last quarter of this year, given all of what we have done, we have now ability to launch a digital product. I think so by end of the next quarter, we will, we'll come with full flow of what digital program and how our customers can reach to us directly and can take an on-tap financing. This is our platform, what we have developed over a period of time. Our platforms are fully integrated. I think so one of the only platform in India which has an ability to lend with or approve a loan within the first 60 minutes without the physical touch, and then supported by underwriting team. How we are funding our customers. So as you know that this company it's an institutional platform. We are driven by a large number of institutional capital provider, and we'll continue to diversify and grow our capital base. And we divide our liability side in three parts: balance sheet led, co-lending, and securitization. In terms of the balance sheet side, I think so we feel very happy that over a period of last 3 quarters, the large number of financial institutions have now started relationship with us. Almost the entire universe of public private sector bank, SFBs, NBFCs are now with us. We have done multiple capital market trade, and now we have DFIs coming to us. You would realize that all of our portfolio, we cover out of the total SDG goal, our portfolio qualifies for 5 of the SDG goals. We are an ESG compliant company, and the kind of impact which we are creating, we are now being able to attract multiple small to large DFIs. So as a source of capital, this would become a permanent source. But more so, our belief is that banks' term lending to NBFC would continue to evaporate. Because banks are not comfortable taking exposure onto the NBFC, but they are more happy to take exposure of the end client. Now, it's a very complicated process. It is evolving as securitization has evolved 10 years back. Co-lending is now evolving, but we are at the forefront of it. Our 2 year of effort, both on the technology side and also on the underwriting and understanding and bringing the bridge, we have large partnership which are now emerged. Bank of Baroda, IDBI, and State Bank should happen soon. We are already signed partner with them, but under the revised guideline, we'll start soon. But that gives us an ability to become really an lending as a service, originate and automatically sell, wherein we focus on the core, which is distribution, underwriting, and servicing the customer, and liability flow keep coming to us. And also it eliminate the need of constantly raising capital. And this is very efficient use. The ROE creation through a co-lending model is very, very superior. So hopefully, like it has happened in US, it should happen in India as well. And this should become permanent structural change for NBFCs in India. In terms of our governance and team, I think this is a company which is completely driven by its board. Any shareholder which is more than 10% of our company have automatic right to get a board seat. Our entire board is supervised by a set of majority independent director. We have brought people from multiple domains in financial services industry. We have invested beside our management team, which is here with you. We have made sure that in our initial period of time, we invest heavily in all of our 3 layer of organization. So this company is not driven by 1 or 2 people. This company is driven, the 700 people are driven by a very high quality, very experienced, 75 plus management team, which is in what we call L1 and L2. In terms of the portfolio view, most of this data is already reported. So our largest channel continues to be a branch-led prime channel, which contributes 62% odd, and all of our channel have now started growing. majority of our headcount is growing in our micro business, and because most of our branches are 3 to 4 months old, the real result of that would start happening in next financial year. By end of this year, we should be exiting at a good run rate, but the high yield portfolio which will come in our micro business would start happening in next year. This is our sectoral portfolio snapshot, regional portfolio snapshot. Last but not the least, I think so in terms of this, there is a lot of noise around portfolio quality. Obviously, pandemic was not in anyone's control. We didn't design anything for that. But fortunately, because in our pre-pandemic period, we had focused largely on low yield secured business, our portfolio quality have remained stable and it has come back very strongly. All of our stage one assets are more than 95%. In terms of our restructured portfolio, we are at 7%, which is much lower than the industry peer set. And within that, the largest contribution is obviously hospitality and education. Education is coming back very strongly. None of our restructuring is wherein we have created a terming out, which means that we have delayed the problem for a long period of time. Most of our restructuring is EMI reset. I was paying in 10 lakh rupees of EMI. My cash flow has now become half. So we have reduced the EMI 5 years and we increased the tenure. So that is the kind of restructuring which we have done. In terms of the financials, so I think so we have done relatively well. I think our base effect of AUM build out is now resulting in our profit to increase over a period of time. But structurally, where quarter two we did a PBT of 4.7 crore, but we genuinely believe that every passing quarter, because of our AUM is growing and OPEX is not growing in the same sense, while our headcount is growing exponentially, but not in terms of the absolute cost, our profitability would start tracking towards an upward trajectory. And this is how we want to build. On asset side. We continue to open our physical branches and mature our prime branches and invest heavily in our digital infrastructure. Liability side, we are now targeting DFIs to come and co-lending to become functional. And this is what we will do in next few years is given. So I'll pause here and wait for questions. I, along with the entire management team, would be very happy to answer any question. We have actually 95 people, so we'll take questions right away.
Sachin, you may want to give just try for video rights once again. We'll try and have the management team video switched on.
Well, I will do that.
Just try it once. If not, then
yeah. Good. Thank you, sir, for that detailed backdrop. And I think now everybody can start their video. We'll begin with Q&A now. I request participants, if you want to ask a question, please click on the raise hand icon to ask a question. We'll wait for a minute before we start with the Q&A. So to begin with, we request Anil to please go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. And let me tell you, sir, your presentation is very detailed, and I will rank it among the best among all the NBFCs and banks. So thanks for excellent disclosures. You have already touched about the co-lending in your presentation, but I have a few more questions on that just to understand it better. See, you have a product called Pratham, under which you are lending at less than 10%. So what I want to understand is, I think it is under co-lending. So because of co-lending, do you get any cost of funds advantage because of which you will be able to compete better with the larger NBFCs and banks? That is the first question on NBFC. And the second related question on co-lending is your ROAs. Will it be same under co-lending versus if you take directly term loan from the bank? So these are the two questions on the co-lending.
Yeah, I would take a stab and Amit Gupta can add on to that. First and foremost, sir, we would have not been present in that segment of the market had it not been a co-lending. Because our cost of borrowing today is roughly around 10.4, 20.5. So obviously, logically, we cannot lend a customer at 9%. The reason why we are being able to do is because when I lend to a customer at 9%, 80% of my book get transferred to the bank post disbursement, and on that 80% I get a fees, and that's why my blended return on my 2% is higher than my cost of borrowing. And that's why we are being able to do that. Second, in lending business, if you lend 100 or if you have an outstanding big book of 100, you have to minimum for our size of NBFC, you have to need at least 30 rupees of capital to earn your spread of 3, 4, 5%. In co-lending, actually, you earn the same spread, but you don't have to provide capital because it's an off-balance sheet asset, and you don't have to give any capital. You have no capital charge, and you have no. It is a pari passu transfer of assets, so we don't provide any kind of credit support as well. Amit, if you want to add something.
Mr. Nath, you have actually explained most of the advantages. Another thing which basically co-lending brings to the table for an NBFC like ours, most of our secured term loans are actually done door to door of 10 years or maybe sometimes higher. So when you do co-lending, your average tenor on the secured portfolio, because most of our co-lending is actually being done for our prime products, where our tenor and prime secured products, where our tenor to door tenors is 10 to 12 years. When you do co-lending, immediately your 80% of that book actually gets transferred to the bank with whom you are doing the co-lending. So your duration on the asset side actually comes down, which ensures that by doing the co-lending, you are also able to do your asset liability management in an efficient manner, because on your liability side, it's very difficult to get liabilities which would be matching this kind of tenor.
Got it. And so second question, I'm sure many people must have already asked you this question. We have target to reach 1% of MSME, which means we need to double our balance sheet every 12 to 18 months. So definitely our processes and others are a lot superior to other NBFCs. But in the past, whenever any NBFC or bank has tried to grow at these rates, they have faced some problems. So what are we doing so that we don't face any such problems?
Yeah. So I think, it's a very difficult question to answer, but I think you have to contextualize in this way. One, size of the market. Second, our capital support and the kind of distribution infrastructure which we are building. You are right. We have said by 2025, we would have an AUM of 20,000 odd crore. But remember that large portion of that business is coming from our prime segment and an average ticket size of around 2 odd crores. But going largely, so we have said that of that 20,000 crore, almost 50% of our business is off balance sheet, is through securitization and co-lending model. Second is the number of asset channels which we are now we have built. So Ugro for MSME segment within our defined 8 sectors and micro has distinct 6 verticals through which the assets are being originated. And there is both management capability, technology infrastructure, risk protection mitigation infrastructure has been already built. So prime, wherein our prime business under Mr. Mande is managed by 3 national sales heads, and then by multiple structure of regional head cities infrastructure and 25 odd locations. Our micro business is headed by a chief business officer and then 2 national credit head and then a large number of branch infrastructure. Our supply chain business is headed by a very experienced business head who has done the same business for last 22-25 years, and then a full infrastructure around that. Our machinery business is headed by a person who has done machinery business for almost 25 years and building full infrastructure around himself. Our partnership and alliances channels is a completely digital channel wherein we have invested very heavily in building an API box, which has an ability to integrate with our Mandal line partner, and digital would be a digital infrastructure. Why people falter, and I have no way to figure that out, is because when you try to do first, you have to keep your portfolio granular. Second, you have to have a philosophy of risk curve. So today this company can actually generate double of its profitability by just taking our 30% unsecured portfolio to 60% unsecured portfolio. So we balance that. We believe that the price yield to loss ratio curve is very defined in India, and the breakout of that would happen over a period of time. And that's why today large portion of our portfolio we keep in prime, secured, lower yield, and we optimize on the other side by doing other product. So I think we have to constantly match this business with capital, people infrastructure, and technology infrastructure. It's half glass full, half glass empty story, sir. When you start with 1,000 crore of capital, and in 8 years, if you can't go up to 20,000 crore, and this is the market opportunity is so less that you can't build it. Why? What you think is a very hyper growth? We believe that given the kind of infrastructure which we build, it's not an hyper growth. Once you reach to that level, after that, obviously you cannot continue growing or doubling your AUM every year. Then you get to what we call 10 to 15, 17% growth rate. So an HDFC or a Kotak would not double their AUM every year, but would do 10 to 15 or 20% growth after maturity. But in initial period, because of the base effect, they will go up to that hockey stick curve and then stabilize from there. Anuj, Amit, Monday, anyone want to
just
add?
one more point, which I thought I should basically cover here. One of the very important aspect of basically ensuring that we continue to grow as per our business plan is the availability of capital. That is where our unique business model actually comes in very, very handy. And I think maybe when we were designing this business model, we were probably not really focusing on that. This has actually come by accident. Our sectoral approach has actually helped us in ensuring that access to capital is much more efficient. Why I am saying that, if you look as an example, on 7th of May 2021, RBI actually announced a scheme of on-tap liquidity for banks, which was to be deployed for healthcare services. That is a 50,000 crore scheme where banks were actually given double advantage. One is basically those assets which are basically getting created through this liquidity scheme gets classified as PSL, which is a normal advantage. The second one was, in today's world, the banks are actually awash with liquidity. That liquidity can actually be parked with RBI at a rate which is 40 basis point higher than repo, to the extent they deploy that much in the healthcare scheme. So because of that thing, because we have got healthcare as a focus area, industry focus area, we could convince these lenders that they can lend to us for on lending to healthcare activities, and they can they can take advantage of this line. Similar to this food processing industry, which is also another focus area, we have actually been able to mobilize certain credit lines which will actually go for these kind of industry sectors. So availability of capital also is something which is, given our business model, we are able to address that very, very efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'll jump back in the.
I would like to add to the hyper growth story. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Amit, very well.
Yeah. So I would like to add to the hyper growth story and just add to what Sachin said. I think, to summarize, the last 3 years and in fact, essentially 1.5 years, we've got our risk models right. We've got our risk models right across all our 5 pillars of business. That's one. Two, now we are at a phase where we've got talent on board, which has tremendous execution capabilities, whether it is distribution, whether it is technology, or whether it is being able to mine alternate data. And so risk models there, we've got talent on board, we've been able to we have the people who have done these execution skills and have proven track record. The next path is all about execution, and with that kind of people on board and with that kind of talent, I think we're pretty much confident that we are going to move this book size in a prudent manner and at the pace that which we want. So there is no question that we are worried that whether this hyper growth is going to add incremental risk. The answer is no. And are we confident? The answer is yes.
Thank you, sir. I'll join back in the queue.
I would just take a few questions, Shipal, which are on the chat, if that's okay.
Yes, it is to do that. I think if we posted.
Very quickly. So, okay, so I think there is a question: why new investors are not buying us and able to recover even their financial costs? So there are two parts of it. One, this company, if you look at its capital structure, so we had, when we raised our capital was raised from 3 sets of investors. 4P investors who came along with me and invested capital, which is ADV, which owned 21% of the company, Newquest, which is owned 21%, Samina 13%, and PAG Asia 19%. And they 3 of them now on our board. And then we had we have done a QIP of 120 crore allotted equity to large number of individual investor, family offices, and others. For more, other than our private equity investors, most of other investors came from a short-term gain benefit, because at the pricing at which we were allotting equity was very cheap at that point of time. And those investors, in my personal view, came with a 1 or 2 year view. And now, given the price has attraction, most of them would like to take the liquidity back. So there's a small set of investors. And as you know, some of our QIP came through investors which are funds which are time driven. For example, one of our investors, which used to own around 4% of our equity, had a fund life of 3 years. His fund life is over, so they have no choice but to exit. But most of those exits have happened clearly. Also, for a company of our nature, we keep hearing this all the time from most of the institutional investors, that the company is doing so well, but there is no liquidity. Markets are all built around buying and selling. At some point in time, somebody would sell and somebody would buy, and then only the liquidity would happen. We can continue doing very well, but if there is no availability of liquidity or quantity, then obviously there is no float which comes into the company. So that has started happening. Second question is why CFO and directors have resigned on recent time. I think so CFO is not a recent time. I think so the stock exchange update is only about confirmation of that from our board. Our CF, Sandeep, who was our CFO, came from ASK, which was an asset management company. He actually resigned around a month back, and Amit Gupta, who's on this call, was our head of treasury. We have bifurcated our treasury and finance function, and Amit immediately took over as a CFO. Reason why Sandeep, for him, lending industry was new. He did an experiment with himself, but now he want to go back to asset management industry where it is spent almost 25 plus years. So that is the reason why this change. We think actually for company it is beneficial that the person who has to manage the front end of the liability side also control our entire finance and management reporting structure. Yesterday we have one of the nominee of PAG, Mr. Kanak Kapoor, resigned. Primary reason of his resignation is that once a private equity investor has a nominee on the board, they become privy to what we call price sensitive information, which enables them, if they want or choose to provide some liquidity or take off some money from the market, they cannot do it till the time they are on the board, because our board processes every 15 days we do some or other update, and sometimes those updates may be forward looking information and may be price sensitive. And in order to avoid that conflict, Mr. Kanak Kapoor decided to stay away from the board. And Nishit is alternate director. So when the primary director goes, the alternate director goes automatically. That's the second question. Third is, what is the maximum ticket size of lending and how many lenders falling in that bracket? I'm not very clear. We do, as I said, that multiple product and program, we do right from 1 lakh to 3 crore ticket size. Comparatively, where you stand in industry in terms of NPA, I think that's for market to judge. We believe that we are far superior in terms of our gross NPA and net NPA performance post 2 round of pandemic. Second, I think so next 12 to 24 months are the period of time when real NPAs would come, because there's a lot of restructuring which has happened, which is not showing true picture. Last question, what is your forecast of raising equity? This company at a rate which it is growing, our belief is that it will depend upon how much of off-balance sheet asset which is happening and how much of on-balance sheet asset will happening. We have said that we would like to maintain debt equity ratio capped at roughly around 3.8 to 4%. If we start crossing that, we'll raise more equity. Just now, follow-up question come that is PAG is looking to exit. Sir, we don't know that. I think so. It's about not they wanting to exit. They are fund. Their process of buying and investing and all, they are mostly long-term shareholders. But obviously, as a shareholder, there is an interest among our large shareholders also to provide liquidity as and when required to the market, so that our shareholding base continue to get diversified. Given at the size at which we are growing and the visibility we are creating in market, we believe large number of institutional shareholders, retail shareholders would continue to get attracted. So probably they will use that as an opportunity to provide liquidity. I think so that is one long question, which I think so I've tried covering and answering most of the question. which were there. So Shreepal, we can go back to other
Sure,
questions
sir.
and we'll
Yeah,
cover this.
yeah, we'll take that up. Sure, sure. Thank you for taking up those questions, sir. So now moving on to the question queue, we have the next question from Kushal Kasliwal. Kushal, please go ahead with your question.
Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, Kushal.
Kushal, you are audible. You just put yourself on mute.
Yeah, Kushal,
I hope this
please
is
go
fine
ahead
now.
with the question. Yeah.
Yeah, firstly, I just wanted to understand the SFC financing space. I see a lot of startups raising funds, VC funds. How is the space looking to you, and what is the kind of growth rate you can expect on that particular space? Like, I recently read that ProgCap raised capital for retailer financing market. How are you looking at that market?
You are right, sir. So I think so people who have a base of money, so all payment platform, merchant platform who have base of merchant flow are now adding credit to them. So Bharat Pay, ProgCap, multiple of that. I think we are also in the similar space that except that the public market probably don't understand the potential which this company showcase. We look at it two way. As I said, the lending in India is moving from collateral to cash flow, and cash flow attached to transaction flow, which will be driven by this whole OCEN network, would automate credit in a very big way. And we are there, but our approach is to not just look at, we are not just funded by VC and we are not burning cash for building a future. We are building a sustainable business model which generate cash flow, so that we satisfy, we make sure that we are not driven by only equity capital risk. But I think so structurally we see that as a mega market opportunity, and over a period of time, as we get more comfortable, we will do that. Almost all of these companies which are raising capital, they come to us and partner with us, and we integrate with them to provide the balance sheet support. So that is the way we look at the model. And as I think so, as the last quarter of this year, we would also do some of the large partnership, and we'll start looking merchant financing. But we want to constrain the size of the portfolio currently, because remember, most of the VC funded businesses don't have to go to an SBI and PNB and Bank of Baroda and raise liability capital. Because when you go to a large bank and when you have to raise liability, if your portfolio profile is contrarian to what they can absorb, your liability lines can get completely stopped. So when you build your business, you have to build portfolio construct which is sellable both to your liability and both to your asset side. Anuj, Amit, you want to add something on that?
So I mean, from potential perspective, as Mr. Nath was saying earlier, the sky is the limit in the MSME lending space, and there are various formats which are available. Now, the space in which we are maintaining a very fine balance, both from our liability stakeholders' perspective and our assets ambitions. So, and we think this is a very sweet spot. And I would also like to, explain how we are approaching this differently than, because somebody asked earlier, and the connotation was that if you press the pedal too fast, there is a chance of dilution of your risk framework. And how we are different than others in the sense that because we are focused on sectors and our internal developing model are now proven through last 3 years of portfolio management, when we are expanding, our rules are very clear of what we do, and a lot of times the data science is directing those rules pan India versus any other format where the expansion means more discretionary call. So this is the major difference between any other player. So we think we are at this point of time very suited to any kind of format, because our end target segment and our ability to underwrite that segment is very clear and very scientific.
Understood. Thank you, sir. Another question which I had is the India Stack 2.0, which is like the account aggregator, the USEN network. I understand it's sort of an open network which can be used by all the lenders. So how do we differentiate while we use these networks, and how are we kind of beneficial versus other large lenders or other NBFCs who use this India stack going forward?
Sir, caution worldwide. I think so. It is the story of incumbent versus the new entrant. The problem of the incumbent is that there is a legacy system, there is an embedded knowledge which you have to leave to transition to something, right? So it is not that why the fintechs are like players like us are gaining traction, because we don't have a legacy to change. We can adopt faster, we can learn faster, and we can automate credit. Versus for a legacy system, it has to change something. So that is the first one. And that is not just in India, it's happening worldwide. Number two, I think so it is about where your focus is. Because we are a deeply focused player, because everything we have started with building knowledge around our sector, subsector, we then build our capability around our data analytics, and then we build technology and physical infrastructure. Our ability, so the data is commoditized, right? It is a democratic data. Your ability to decipher that data and create decisioning system is what would differentiate us. So when I said that today 100% of our underwriting is on the tripod of GST, banking, and bureau, it is about our ability and 1.5 year of 2 year of work, being able to pull the GST, pull the banking, pull the bureau, and being able to come to an algorithm math of saying that this customer is eligible for 5 lakh or 50 lakh rupees, and predict whether he will do a 1% loss or a 2% loss, is what is differentiating. Fortunately, this was looked at for us a year back when we talked about, or 1-2 year back we talked about it. It was looked with great amount of skepticism, but now pandemic has actually proven that a force an impact like that, our our data analytics prowess, our underwriting capability, and the knowledge which we have built underlying that is coming out to be true. So I think that is the only differentiation. It is differentiation of being able to do differently than what legacy systems do. That this is just not in India. This is happening in US. Most of the, whether it's on deck, Cabbage, Lending Circle, most of the neo banks. What that has happened, it is happening in Europe. It is happening by force in India. Because by that logic, actually, no neo bank should exist. By that logic, no BNPL player should exist. By that logic, no other new generation player exists. I don't think so that the difference is in terms of the capital capability or people capability. It's about being deeply focused and use that data to your advantage.
Understood. Thank you so much, sir. If I can squeeze in a last question. In one of our slides, I think slide 26, we mentioned that post our score filter is applied, it becomes kind of more difficult to incrementally reduce risk by handpicking. So do we completely rely on the score filter, or is there some kind of hand handling after that score filtering, which we do for MSME lending?
Anuj, you already did?
Can you just repeat?
Sure, sir. I was just referring to your slide 26 in your investor presentation, where you have mentioned that post your score filtering framework, which is like a proprietary tool for your guys, it becomes more difficult to incrementally reduce risk by handpicking, the MSMEs which you want to lend. So my question is, do you completely rely on the tech score filtering proprietary algorithm which you have, and once you are done with the score filtering, is there no hand holding which happens after that, or how does it work? How does the actual lending work for you guys?
Understood. So what we have approached, and we have to be practical and smart about this. In India, in the SME ecosystem, although a lot of data now is available through GST and banking, we also know that there are a lot of other data which is still has to be gathered through reference. So we have a two-stage approval process. In the first stage, when we gather all the data, which is GST, banking, and bureau, the system gives an in-principle decision. And once the system says an in-principle okay, then the transaction moves in a typical credit manager's queue. And then he does the normal physical reference checks, does a personal discussion with the customer, And in case of a secured loan, the other due diligence, legal due diligence of the title, the technical valuation of the property, the field investigation of his residence kicks in. And then a final decision happens taking into account all these inputs. So the first filter is what the machine is saying. The second filter is what the value addition the credit manager has done through a physical meeting. And then a final call is taken. So we are not going solely at this point in time by machine. But eventually, as our algorithms are getting more and more evolved, we are now in position to start experimenting completely digital flow as well. And we will very shortly start doing pilot on that.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question from the line of Rishi. Rishi, please go ahead with your question.
I would really appreciate if the people who are asking questions, if you can just tell who they are very briefly, then it would be very helpful.
Sure.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Nath. Can you hear me?
Yes, Rishi.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for sharing so much information. I mean, this is one of the very few calls where we get to hear so much information. And I'm Rishi. I'm a retail investor who is very keen on your growth since recently one of my closely followed leaders have joined YouGrow. That's how I got introduced to the company, and I've been watching your YouTube videos and podcasts regularly. My question is with regards to your platform, the GrowXstream platform. I just wanted to understand, when you say you're onboarding either a bank or a fintech, for example, Kinara Capital recently, what does that exactly mean? I mean, how long does it take to onboard? Is that some sort of a discussion around each of your credit models? And what exactly is the USP of the GrowXstream platform? How can it not, I mean, what sort of a moat do you have around it that other fintech platforms or lending marketplaces can't take away from you?
Absolutely. So Rishi, it's a very good question. Let me try attempt an answer to that. So look at this in terms of what we call the yield curve or the cost of borrowing curve. So today, YouGrow, because of its size of capital, its portfolio quality, and the universe of the lending institution coming to us, have a cost of capital of 10.5%. Now think of a Kinara or any other partner, they have a cost of capital of 15.5%. The reason that is happening is because of the perceived risk on Kinara's portfolio and the size of the capital and their rating curve. Now, we also want to service that customer which Kinara is servicing, but we don't want to take the same amount of perceived risk. So the approach we find is that you go partner with Kinara, understand their credit policy, overlay our credit policy and score platform, and then agree that you would co-lend with them to their end customer. It's all very good till that point of time. But it's about bringing efficiency, and that's where the platform come into play. It's an API-driven platform, wherein once an end customer is originated on their system, it flows through API to our system, tested against the predefined credit policy and all parameters, and the end customer is funded. Customer is end funded at same 22%. We would take 15% net rate to us, and there is some form of a credit, first loss cover is being given by our partner. So the portfolio being generated at the same level, but I think so the perceived loss risk in our portfolio is lesser, which means my lenders is still comfortable to continue giving me money at 10.5%. Without any OPEX, I'm transferring that to a partner of ours. And that is a large ecosystem you can build. So that's one side, what we call the asset spectrum. Now look at the other side of that spectrum of GrowXstream platform, which is the large banks. So today when the large banks, they are very comfortable sign a co-lending partnership with YouGrow, integrate with an API, and a branch-led channel secure business, they are co-lending in same 20-80 ratio. But those banks also at some point of time want to go to likes of Kinara and others. But the difficulty is how do you understand for a large public sector or a private sector bank to go right up to the bottom of the pyramid is very difficult, both technology wise, credit wise, everything. So eventually GrowXstream platform would support our balance sheet capital to go to our partners without we taking the same level of risk, and also eventually a large liability provider or a big bank being able to do co-lending with my partner through my platform. So that's why it becomes a virtual play. So, we don't talk too much about it, but we think that GrowXstream platform can enable capital from end to end, from a very large institution to a very small entity through us. So that's our model, and obviously it's a fee-based platform, so it earns fees on both sides of the spectrum.
And thank you, Mr. Nath. Just to understand, in terms of competition for this marketplace, do you already have competitors in the market who have a similar platform?
Yeah.
And also the close-knit platform like Mint by Cred, for example, that does allow the liability side to actually come from retail investors, for example, peer-to-peer lending, that's all. Do you think at some point in time you would be interested at all to open that up?
Yeah. So I think it's a peer-to-peer lending platform. The regulatory framework in India, actually, it curtails only up to 1 lakh rupees per borrower. We building this platform largely from institutional capital flow to a B2B platform, but not to the end customer. See, because our view is that if you are not a bank, regulators are not very comfortable retail liability to flow to any institutional platform. So NBFCs are capped taking public deposit. It's only bank which is allowed to take public deposits. So any form of platform which will become scale, wherein retail investors are deploying money for a credit product and is not a bank, in some form or shape would continue to be curtailed. So our view is that this is largely institutional. A large bank being able to lend to an end customer through a partner platform of ours, through our GrowXstream platform, is our aspiration. As regulation evolves, our technology capability is also to take it to a peer-to-peer platform at any point of time. Right now, I think so the risk-reward ratio of investing a time of our amount and money to bring this to a retail investor is not positively poised.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have the next question from the line of Rishikesh from RoboCapital. Please go ahead with your question, Rishikesh.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, Rishikesh.
Hi, sir. So my first question is if you could share your disbursements for October month.
We have not gone public on that. Hopefully, we should do. We are doing monthly disclosures. We should be announcing that post Diwali.
Yeah.
I think so it should be in line with how you have seen in September.
Okay. I saw in an interview where it was mentioned that UGrow will be touching 350 crores of disbursements very soon. So just wanted to know how soon can we do it, like next 2 months, 3 months, like how soon can we start this 350 crores?
Sir, obviously our interest is, so we think so that incrementally with every passing month, you will see the growth. Where we are, we think so we will exit our year more than double run rate is our first view right now. But as you know that we are cautious. I think so given that 100 crore mark which we have reached on vaccination, the risk on the third wave is receded quite a bit. We are waiting for Diwali festivity to be over and see that there is no comeback of the COVID in the same thing. As soon as we are comfortable with all of that, I think so we will continue to grow in the same pace.
This is the operator. So I just request the participant to please limit the question to 2 only. So moving on to the next question. So we have the next question from the line of Mr. Vineet. Vineet, please go ahead with your question.
So Vineet, if the question is what you have written on the chat, I can very quickly respond to that. Okay, let me respond. I think so by the time he responds. Vineet's question is, isn't your loan tenure of 10 to 12 years is too long, wherein the primary asset financed by you would have depreciated to scrap value? Sir, our 3 product, Pratham, Sanjeevani and Sathi. Pratham has a tenure of 7 to 9, 10 years, and so as Sanjeevani. Sathi is around 4 years. This security under this is a collateral which is self-occupied residential property, industrial property, or a commercial property. They don't depreciate to scrap value. So we finance the business, the working capital and term need for a small business, but the collateral is the property which comes from the an entrepreneur itself, and they don't depreciate to scrap value at all.
No, what I meant is if you finance machinery, does it not go
Machinery, sir, we do maximum tenure of 3 years.
3 years? And just one more thing, like what is your total unsecured book size?
So, sir, we have disclosed that our unsecured book would be roughly around 30% of the total book size.
No, 30% I got, but in figures?
So 2,000 crore, 30%.
2,200 crore ke 30% almost, isn't it? Around 600 crores?
Yeah, Anuj, that would be right?
Yeah, a little less.
And that's 650 crores?
Yeah.
Okay, and what will be the average ticket size per customer in this unsecured portfolio?
Around 17 lakh.
About 17, 18 lakhs.
17 to 18 lakhs.
Yes.
Each individual borrower in unsecured portion.
Yes, sir.
And these are like, doesn't have even the stocks or any such facilities?
No,
there is no hypothecation of stocks or any such
so
thing.
unsecured loans means a loan which has been given.
It's all clean. It's all clean.
Totally on the basis of the credit quality, wherein we have analyzed the GST, the banking, the bureau, and it's a small tenure, less than 2.5 years tenure, working capital finance driven by that.
Okay, and one more thing, like I want to know what is the running facility that you give, like cash credit and overdraft facilities that you.
Sir, as an NBFC, we can only do term loan. We can do differential tenure of term loan. We can do a 1 month tenure to long tenure term loan, but as we are not a bank, we cannot give a cash credit facility or an overdraft facility.
So not a single facility of running nature.
NBFCs are not allowed to do that. We are not a bank.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I request participant to please give their introduction while asking the question. Moving on to next question. So just one question from one of the participants. So the question is, there are a lot of neobanks also doing SME financing, and they are able to offer payments, payment, accounting, and other solutions. Given their comprehensive offering, how would you be able to compete with them? That's the question.
You don't need to compete with them, Shripat. We are a partner to them, because see, that's why I said in the beginning, there are people who have base of customer. It can be a merchant base, it can be a base of small businesses, it can be coming through a payment platform, accounting, and other solution. What we have realized that most of the people who are in fee base or a service offering, when it comes to the credit, it is very difficult. It's a completely different ball game. Our approach is that we don't have to compete with any of them. We are integrating partner or provider of credit to all of those platforms, as long as those have data set which we can use to underwrite that customer.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next question. We have the next question from the line of Mr. Chirag Maru. Chirag, please introduce yourself and go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am from Keynote Capital. Sachin sir, I have two questions. One is, like you have mentioned that you're going to be comfortable with the debt to equity ratio level of 3.15. So should I expect that? Should I expect that till this level is reached, we are not going to do any kind of QIP and no equity raise?
Yes, I think so. So I think so. Look, you never take it to the brink and then think of it. But I think so that it is a function. That is the range we would like to maintain in our initial period of time before our liability side and the rating agency start getting uncomfortable. But in that, Chirag, one of the biggest moving part is how much of, because as we said that we target 30 to 50% of our portfolio start becoming off balance sheet. So today we have a Pratham program, which is with Bank of Baroda, which goes out of our balance sheet, but it's not a big volume generator right now. It should become in next 2 quarters. Very soon we will have a very large bank, which will start doing for our core product, which is our Sanjeevani. And if that get operationalized, our leverage would come down, but our AUM would keep going up. So it is very difficult to predict when we will raise capital, but you are right. I think so whenever we will be nearing to our 4 time or 3.8 time of leverage, we will definitely start thinking about more capital raise.
Okay. Thank you for that. Another question is that, so as you have said that going forward, we would be increasing our unsecured base to have a better yield on portfolio. I just wanted to ask that, and we have done some restructuring. So, what kind of NPAs are you comfortable with?
I think there are two different questions. So, Chirag, let me answer on the unsecured portion, right? So, unsecured as a connotation have different meaning to different people, right? So, today, if I go to a merchant platform, or if I go to a payment bank, wherein I have an ability to analyze the cash flow data on the payment platform, and then I use my GST banking platform and then give a small loan of 50,000 or 1 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupee. While categorization of that may be unsecured, but we have a very deep visibility of the underlying cash flow, and that's why we are comfortable. Obviously, the pricing of a unlinked cash flow unlinked loan is say 19%, that would be at 16 odd percent. So when we say that we would like to increase gradually our funnel for more unsecured business, it is blindsided that because the 19% yield portfolio will just grow up, because of we are integrating with multiple such platform, and we will make calibrated move to grow our portfolio there. I don't think so that our profile of gross NPA actually changes a lot. Second, in terms of, I think so the tolerance, not necessarily little bit of higher gross NPA means loss ratios, because our gross NPA construct comes from multiplicity of secured and unsecured bucket. And finally, it's gross NPA to loss ratio and how much of pre-provisioning or the buffer at the balance sheet which we are creating. Our view is that if we increase the portion of unsecured business by another 5%, we will create a pre-buffer of incremental yield. Little bit of that we'll use as a creating pre-buffer, so that if there is a delinquency, we can use that buffer to to make sure that our balance sheet is resilient. So it's a little complex mix of how you operate at that. I think so when Anuj made that comment, the comment was in the context that we are comfortable. Historically, we have done all our business at 11.5% yield. If you look at our first year of portfolio, but we are now, because of the level of digitization, the success which we have received on our tripod of data, we are getting comfortable to increase our funnel on those side as well. But it will be dependent upon the level of liability, because if a bank cannot give me a liability for increase unsecured portfolio, we won't do that.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. And if I can squeeze one last question. As we are in the initial phase of our growth where we are expecting to reach a mark of 20,000 crores, I don't say that it's going to happen or not. I just wanted to understand, like, how are your internal targets getting it? Are you able to achieve it? Are you able to overachieve it, or is it underachieved?
So we are there where we are. I think so. They look all our financial business models are built around people productivity and efficiency around our technology and income to OPEX ratio. To give you a color, today we have 50 people, front-end sales people who are in our prime branches, which is the largest contributor of our asset. As of September and October end, the entire 50 people actually have cross peak productivity. So for example, in a secured relationship manager who is supposed to do 3 crore a month has done 4 crore a month. So that's why now we are doing two things. We are increasing people and we're increasing the footprint in our prime branches as well. If you look at our micro branches, we will have around 70 plus branches, and all of our branches are vintage of 3 to 4 months. Average time a micro branch takes to break even is 9 months. I think so in the next 4-5 months, those branches will mature, and then you'll see a flow of new asset at the micro secured lending and 18 to 22% start happening. So there are different line of asset vertical at different level of maturity. We are very happy with our prime business. We are very, very happy with our partnership and alliance channel. I think so next 2 quarters, we will deeply focus on our micro, machinery and supply chain business. And so to bring them at the level of productivity. Once they reach there, then we reinvest back in further infrastructure to grow again. So our growth model is driven by productivity plus infrastructure plus distribution.
Got it. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Chet. Chet, please go ahead with your question. Request you to please give your introduction.
Hello.
Yes,
Hey,
Chase, please go ahead.
thanks for your detailed presentation. I'm a HNI investor, and I stumbled upon Ugro after I had invested in another SME company, SME financier. I have two questions. One about the disbursals growth. You said that disbursals growth is going to increase faster. Can we expect that in the coming 3-4 quarters? The kind of scale you were saying that the business is actually built for. What is the time frame that that kind of growth will kick in? And second was sector composition of the front book. Post COVID, has the sector composition changed? And do you see yourself lending to sectors which post-COVID tailwinds?
Chase, I'll quickly answer. I think there's a lot of questions in the queue. One, I think so. As I said, that our 2025 target is 20,000. We think so that the way it would get achieved, exit run rate every year would double in terms of purely from AUM. I've already said that we expect whatever run rate on the disbursement you saw in September, we think by March exit run rate, it will be double of that. Obviously, month on month, it may vary, but that's our target right now for the current year. You can calculate, what the exit AUM would be, and I think so we would be double of that in next year. In terms of the portfolio construct, so around 2 years back, we had stopped auto component. We will now open that. We are still not doing much on hospitality. Education is still coming back. I think we are still long term. We are still comfortable with all our sector. I think incrementally, because we are taking new types of liability under the COVID RBI COVID scheme, which has come to the bank. So we might have a little uptick in our healthcare financing, but there is nothing extraordinary to that.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you. So just one question, which is there in the queue, which is with respect to the unsecured book. So in the unsecured book, the ticket size is 17 lakh, and the size and the overall book we have is 660 crore. So the question is, how much is originated directly by us, and what would be the share of Kinara, and who do you think we compete with?
Yeah, sorry, very quickly. When we talk about unsecured book, that is completely originated by us. The partnership alliances channel is explained separately. If you look at our asset book, all the 4 channel asset book are disclosed separately. So prime business is prime secured, prime unsecured, and micro. That's our branch-led channel. Then we have supply chain channel plus machinery, and then partnership and alliances. Partnership alliances we look at as one big channel. Underlying partner may be doing different kind of products. Some partners are doing unsecured, some partners are secured, some partners are there. Our relationship and credit matrix, depending upon the credit behavior of the partner, the pricing and the first loss covers and technology integration is defined on that basis.
And so, who do we compete with in this segment, like the unsecured?
In the unsecured segment?
Yes.
All prime banks, all prime large NBFCs, or anyone who is doing the top end credit for an unsecured loan, everyone we compete. We compete on the basis of efficiency, turnaround time, and our ability to assess cash flow for the customer. Amit Mandey, do you want to answer that very quickly? I don't think
absolutely. So, Sachin, like you rightly said, our competitions will be everybody from the large banks like HDFC, going down to NBFCs like the Fullertons or Tata Capitals in this segment. Rightly so. The question is whether such large competition, how do we compete here? Given our sectoral scorecards, given our tech platforms and ability for not only customers but also our partners to access this platform and give quick turnaround times on approvals and disbursals, I think that's how we've been able to set a footprint in this business. And given that our sector scorecards are behaving very well, that is where our confidence to continue this business and grow this comes from. And so we will keep competing with the larger players and build our book.
Got it. So just one thing. So what would be the yield bracket that we have? Like, because we are competing right from the top of the pyramid to the bottom. So then what would be the yield bracket?
So portfolio yield, company level yield we have given. We are at 15.2% of a blended yield at portfolio level.
And for this unsecured loan segment?
We operate between. Nirav, have we disclosed that the product-wise yield?
I think we can. We haven't
Okay, so
discussed it,
it's
but
around,
we can obviously.
yeah, between 17.5% to 19.2% yield is what we do at Unsecured.
That is only particularly for the prime loans. For the micro unsecured, the lending rate would be around 24%. So 22.
Yeah, but that is a very small portion of our micro business.
At this point in time, yeah, I think.
Got it. So just squeezing in one more question there from one of the investors only. So how much of the book was restructured in OTR 1 and in OTR 2?
Wow, that's a quite. So our total restructured book is 7.2% of our AUM.
Approximately half. Approximately half in the first scheme and the rest in the next scheme.
Okay.
Shipal, we should just take the last question now from Saurabh Joshi. He has actually posted it on the Q&A. This thing.
Yeah,
company has become one of the first lenders.
Can I just take one more question, which is on the management, because I don't want people to feel that we are difficult question we don't answer. So yeah, there's some question called some of the senior members have left the company recently. I don't have the name. It is concerning when the head of business keep leaving and can have an impact in the growth. What are the plans to reduce the likelihood of management changes in the future? So whosoever it is, here's the answer. Sir, this company is now in an existence of 3 years. We have seen in financial services, the core management teams evolve over a period of 3 to 5 years. And the reason for that is that there is a set of aspirations for which the company has been designed. Ugro has been designed to build a scale platform for MSME financing, build deep data analytics and digitization, and play on the technology. And we needed a management team which come and embrace that. What we realized in our first 3 years of operation, most of our management team who came and who has left, we wanted to give people time to being able to work on this aspiration. And when we realized that there is an issue with respect to fitment in understanding the changing landscape, gradually we have brought people with caliber which is aligned to that. So there is nothing extraordinary about it. Actually, the management team enhancement which we have done is far superior. Today Ugro is the place attracting talent across the board. We were roughly around 150 people or 170 people last March. We are around 300 people in March 21. We are 730 people as of today. You'll be 1,000 people by December and most probably 1,500 people by March. I think the Ugro has become a place of first choice for talented people who want to make a mark in financial services industry. What are the plans to reduce the likelihood of management changes? As long as people perform, they like our culture. It's a company which has an ownership which is our institutional by nature. Our institutional shareholders and board like the people to benefit from what they create. So management team which will have, and when we say management team is not just which is here, but people even 3 layers below them, people who would like to create a name for themselves and create a mark in financial services industry and build the largest small business financing platform would not leave this company. The level of freedom, autonomy, and experimentation and innovation which is available for management teams here is unparalleled to any other company in the country. Yeah, we can come to the last question of
Saurabh has written, the company has become one of the first lenders to be integrated on government GeM Sahay platform. Are there any other lenders who have been integrated with GeM Sahay? What is the expected business of the company from GeM Sahay? How Ugro is planning to compete with large lenders like SBI on the platform who have low cost of capital and provide finance at lower cost? What's the threshold yield below which this business become unattractive for Ugro Capital?
So this is very excellent question. I think so our effort of doing the pilot with the iSpirit and integrating as the first lender on GeM Sahay was not with an objective to make this as a volume leader for us, because we know that at some point of time our cost of capital is uncompetitive for a platform like GeM Sahay. Because an SBI has an ability to lend sub 9% on a GeM Sahay platform, but they would take time because the level of data analytics which has to be used to do that it would take time for them. In the interim, what we are trying to do is we are trying to attract a large bank to become a co-lender with us, use our technology prowess and provide us the cost of capital so that the time, effort and energy we have invested on GeM Sahay platform can be monetized. More so we did this is to showcase our ability of creating platform which can do what we call flow-based transaction-led financing. So this was the first full implementation of an open credit trail network in some form and shape. And we would the learning there we can now replicate to multiple other platforms, which some of them which may not be as price sensitive as GEM is. GEM, as you know, is government initiative. Government has an intention to bring down the cost of capital for MSMEs there. And in fact, some of the banks are talking to us on partnering with us using our credit underwriting and technology to become a co-lender on that.
I think
I
we
think
should consider
Shipal,
that.
we have
Yeah.
overshooted the time, so it's already one.
Sure,
Another.
sure.
Shripat, any important question, which we might have missed, which you want to take it, so we can do that very quickly.
No, so we've taken, so I've taken care of those questions also, like whatever was sent to me separately. So broadly, we've covered all of it. So with that, we conclude the 2Q FY22 earnings call for Ugro Capital. So any closing remarks if you have, if you want to, if you want to have anything.
No, I on behalf of the management and on my board, I think so. Ugro is a unique company. It is a creation of a early stage startup in a listed domain. We have genuinely believed that most of the early stage startup who are coming now to the public market at a very, very expensive valuation, and all the public market buys the future. Ugro gives the similar opportunity. So we are on the both spectrum. You can compare us with an existing traditional lending institution. You can compare us to a next generation fintech. Choose whatever you want. I think so. We are very motivated. We are happy that the impact of pandemic is receding. We are happy that hopefully the third wave would not be here. We are happy that our entire management team, technology, the amount of hard work which we have done is showcasing. We are seeing the result of that. Number of public shareholders which are increasing in the company is of a different size and nature. We would continue to invest time to keep coming back to every quarter and explain what we are doing. Our intention is to build this company as an institutional platform. A board of 12 people of a size of our company is unheard of. So the quality of governance, the quality of technology and management team, what we have invested time, is something we would like investors to watch out for. We would come back every quarter and tell what we are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to host you. Thanks to all participants. Wish you all a happy Diwali in advance and have a prosperous new year. Thank you, sir. And thanks to all the participants.
Thank you very much,
everyone. Thank you so much.